I'm calling about account number 8814 Alpha, the OSE personal loan, because I have never walked into a Meridian Credit Union branch in my life. The $612.47 payment your letter says is due on May 15th is not something I intend to pay. And the signature on page 3 of the disbursement agreement is not mine. I was standing at my kitchen counter on a Tuesday morning in early May. The certified envelope opened beside my coffee mug, and I was aware of how steady my own voice sounded through the phone speaker. Aware the way I am always aware of my composure when something large is happening. Cataloguing the fact of my own calm the way I might note a reference number or a transaction code. 22 years in accounts payable teaches you that panic is a luxury you cannot afford the moment a document arrives that you do not recognize. The letter had arrived just after 8:30, the weight of it still in my hands. Cream-coloured envelope, official blue border, return address in silver lettering, Meridian Credit Union, Collections Department. The signature required upon delivery had been a small absurdity, I noted without thinking about it. USPS signature confirmed, the carrier had said, clicking through his handheld. I signed for the letter the way I sign for every certified piece of mail. And he time-stamped the receipt, 8:34, a detail I would later understand was the first piece of evidence. That timestamp, when I requested it, would prove precisely when I first learned of the $28,500 loan to the minute. I had opened the envelope at the counter with my coffee still warm, unfolding pages in the order they arrived. First, the letter itself, embossed with the credit union seal, explaining that the OC personal loan in account number 8814 Alpha carried a remaining balance of $28,500 and that the first monthly payment of $612.47 was due on May 15th. 5 days after that was May 20th. I knew this because May 20th was my mortgage refinance closing at First Federal, a closing I had been working toward for 8 months. Not for the satisfaction of it, but for the specific number printed in smaller letters on the loan estimate the refinance lender had sent me in March. $387. $37 less per month than I was currently paying. $56 per month when you accounted for the property tax savings the new escrow would produce. Every month, for the remaining 30 years of a mortgage, I would pay off a loan. Because I had learned 16 years earlier that depending on someone to hold the other side of a financial obligation was a choice that would cost me more than I could afford. My FICO score was 783. I had built it with the precision of someone building something structural. Protected it, in fact, the way some people protect a family recipe or a jewelry box. Odds when you raise a child alone and work your way into an accounts payable supervisor position, and you refinance a house. Your credit score is not an abstract number on a bureau report. It is the calculation that determines whether you are allowed to pay less money or more. It is the proof that you kept your promises, even when keeping them was inconvenient. It's the only thing between you and the question you swore you would never ask anyone else to answer for you. The loan application was inside the envelope, printed on official Meridian stationery. The date was February 7th, 2026. A Saturday. I could account for that Saturday in 10-minute increments. I had been at the farmer's market in the morning, the one on Route 8 near my house, where they have the organic spinach and the honey vendor I buy from twice a month. The receipt was still in my wallet. Actually, February 7th, 10/17, $13.42. I was 3 miles from any Meridian Credit Union branch that morning. I was not applying for a personal loan. I was buying spinach. The disbursement agreement showed that $18,200 had already left the account. Another $9,300 remained outstanding, presumably being held in reserve, or perhaps already promised to someone. The application itself carried my printed name across the top, my address, details that were correct. And then the page that made me set my coffee mug down and read the same line twice. Authorized representative, Tobias Osei. My son, my only child, 27 years old, sales associate at Precision Auto Group, the dealership on the east side that sells luxury vehicles to people with particular tastes and particular financing needs, listed on a loan application bearing my forged signature as the person I had authorized to manage the account in my absence. The room did not fall silent in the dramatic way these things are usually described. Instead, it made a specific sound. The sound of a system registering an error. A kind of small digital click, and then a pause. That was the sound of my breath stopping, and then starting again. I put my hand flat on the counter and did the calculation that takes approximately 4 seconds when you have watched your mortgage payments for 16 years. And you understand what a missed notation on a credit report will do. $612.47 a month. Starting May 15th, 14 days from the date on the letter. 14 days until First Federal was expecting me at the closing table with a clean credit report and a signature on a document that would deliver me the specific payment reduction the April mortgage estimate had promised. If a single late payment notation posted to my credit file before that closing, the approval would disappear. Not be renegotiated, not be adjusted. Disappear. Pulled, voided, retracted. The $387 per month would dissolve. I would go back to the payment I'd been making for the past 10 years. That was the real number. Not $28,500. Not $612.47. The real number was $387. I sat with that calculation for perhaps 3 minutes. I did not call Tobias. I did not call my ex-husband. I called Meridian Credit Union's fraud department. And when a representative answered, I had already organized the facts in my mind with the clarity that comes from managing other people's discrepancies for more than 2 decades. I was aware, as I spoke, that I was using my professional voice, the one I use when a billing code does not match a charge code, when a procedure is on a claim that the insurance has already denied, when a piece of paper in front of me contains information that does not belong to it. That voice is not angry. It is precise. It is the voice of someone who has already decided that emotion is something that will be handled later, in a place where it does not muddy the work. When the representative tried to acknowledge the concern and transfer me to another department, I pressed the record button on my phone, something I do on every single call I make about a disputed charge or a discrepancy in a payment record. It is a habit so embedded in my professional life that I do not think about it. The same way you do not think about checking your mirrors when you change lanes. My supervisor, Derek, once made a joke during a performance review about my voice memo logs, calling them the most organized thing in this building. And we both laughed, though he meant it. 22 years of recording the facts as they are spoken, marking the time, noting the case number, and keeping the audio in a file labelled by the call date. This particular call on May 7th at 8:52 am would eventually become one of many recordings. But it was the first one, the baseline, the moment when I put the fact of the fraud on record with someone in a position to hear it. And I did it in such a way that the credit union's own system would timestamp my objection. I told the representative my name, my social security number, and the account number. I told her I did not apply for the loan and did not authorize the disbursement. I told her that the signature on the documents was not mine. I told her that someone using my identity and my son's name as the authorized representative had taken $18,200 from an account that was registered in my name and spent it on something that had nothing to do with me, and that I would be providing documentation of my location on February 7th, 2026, which would establish that I could not have been present at any credit union branch to sign the application in person. I spoke clearly and calmly, and I listened to her responses. And I did not raise my voice. When she asked whether I wanted to pursue fraud charges, I said I needed to understand the implications before I answered that question. When she asked whether I had any idea who might have accessed my personal information, I said that was something I would need to investigate. When she transferred me to Craig Mallet, the fraud investigator assigned to my case, I repeated the same facts to him in a slightly different order. And I established clearly that I did not intend to pay the $612.47 when it came due, and that I did not intend to allow the credit union to report this account to any credit bureau as delinquent, because I did not owe the money. Craig was polite and skeptical in equal measure, a tone that suggested he had received false fraud reports from people who had co-signed loans they now regretted, or who had authorized charges and then changed their minds. Yeah, I understood the skepticism. I did not take it personally. What I did was speak with the precision of someone who had nothing to hide and everything to prove. I provided my mortgage closing date. I provided my FICO score. I told him that my refinance approval was time-sensitive and that a single notation on my credit report would result in immediate loss of that approval and an increase in my monthly payment of $387. I explained that even if I wanted to pay the fraudulent debt in full, doing so would require resources I could not access without jeopardizing the closing, and therefore the entire situation required resolution within the 14 days remaining. He said they would investigate and be in touch. I hung up the phone and stood at the counter again, looking at the 3 numbers I had just entered into the spiral notebook beside the envelope. $612.47. 14 days, 783. These were not abstract figures anymore. They were the actual ground I was standing on. The deadline was real. The consequence was quantifiable. Everything else, the shock, the betrayal, the question of who my son had become, could be addressed after May 20th. Right now, there was only a countdown, and I was precisely the kind of person who knew how to manage a countdown. Looking back at who Tobias had become by the time that certified letter arrived, I was not interested in calling him ungrateful or accusing him of betrayal in the theatrical way these stories are usually told. What I was interested in was how precisely I had taught him to be the person who would open a loan application under my name and sign it with another woman's notary stamp. That is a more specific thing than simple entitlement. That required knowledge. That required vocabulary. That required understanding exactly what he was doing when he did it. And I had given him all three. The divorce was 16 years before the letter. Tobias was 9 years old, still young enough that the end of the marriage felt, to him, like a problem I was managing, which it was. What he saw was the aftermath, a smaller apartment for a year, a mother who drove him to soccer on Saturday mornings while the logistics of dissolution moved through lawyers and mediation rooms behind the scenes. Those Saturday drives were my practice ground for a specific kind of composure. I would merge onto Route 8, with my hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, listening to him talk about school or his friends or what he wanted for lunch. And inside that conversation, I would be calculating the mortgage, whether I could keep the house, what it would cost to refinance it. He would fall asleep in his car seat on the drive home, his head against the window, his mouth slightly open, his hand curled against his chest, and I would drive with the specific kind of focus reserved for protecting something that cannot protect itself. What I did not know then was that I was teaching him something without speaking a word about it. I was showing him, through the way I managed a crisis, that you do not panic. You do not call and ask for help from people who have already failed you. You do not explain what you cannot afford. You figure it out alone, and you do it with such composure that the person depending on you does not know that the thing being managed was ever in danger. That is a lesson that looks like strength when you are 9 and your mother keeps driving you to soccer on Saturday mornings. It looks different when you are 27 and you have learned to mimic that same composure while applying for a loan under someone else's name. By the time Tobias turned 17, I had spent 16 years building my own accounts from zero. I had paid everything myself. I had learned which terms in a document could be weaponized against you, and I wanted him to understand it before he was old enough to sign something he did not read. One Saturday afternoon, not a drive this time, but an actual lesson, I spread a real car financing sheet across the granite counter in front of him. I had pulled it from my own documents, a loan I had already paid off. And I told him we were not leaving that table until he could define every term on the page. He was impatient. He wanted to be somewhere else, the way 17-year-olds do. I did not care about that. I pointed to a line in the document. "Wet signature," I said. "What does that mean?" He did not know. I explained it meant your actual hand, writing your actual name on an actual piece of paper in front of someone who could verify it. Not electronic, not delegated. You, present, accountable. Then I moved to the next term. Authorized representative. I made him repeat it. I explained that this was the person you were explicitly saying had permission to manage the account, to make decisions about it, to access it on your behalf. This was not something you gave casually. This was not something you gave because someone asked nicely, or because you trusted them, or because you loved them. This was a legal designation of power, and it meant that whatever the authorized representative did with that account, you were legally responsible for it. The third term was disbursement schedule. When the money leaves the account, I told him, when your promise to repay becomes actual spending. He was restless. He kept glancing toward the door, but I did not let him leave that table. I made him define all three again. and then again, until they were embedded in whatever part of his brain store's vocabulary. I thought I was teaching him how to protect himself. I was showing him what to look for, what to understand, how to read a document so carefully that you could never claim you had not known what you were signing. What I was actually doing was teaching him my language. I was giving him the specific words required to complete a loan application under my name, to list himself as the authorized representative, and to understand, in the vocabulary I had placed in his mouth, exactly what he was doing when he did it. The rent came up 3 times before the letter, and I handled each one the way I handled everything, alone, with boundaries, with the belief that clarity would eventually land. At 22, he called to say the job had not started yet. The paycheck was delayed, and he was short for rent. This was the first time. I said yes, but I drove to his apartment instead of sending money. Because I wanted to say the thing out loud. We sat in his living room, and I explained that this was not something I could do repeatedly, because my own financial security depended on the margin I kept. I told him that a mother's generosity without boundaries was not generosity. It was self-destruction. And I had not spent 16 years building a life alone so that my son could dismantle it one bailout at a time. He listened. He nodded. He said he understood. He said it would not happen again. A year later, the same ask came again. Different apartment. Same problem. I was less warm that time. I explained the same thing in the same words, but with less patience in my delivery. He nodded. He said it would not happen again. I said, "Tobias, I need you to hear what I am saying to you. This cannot happen again." He said, "I know. I get it. I'm sorry." I believed him. 8 months before Meridian Credit Union sent that certified envelope, Tobias came to the house on a Sunday afternoon. We were at the kitchen table again, the same one where I had drilled him on financial terminology when he was 17, and where I had drawn boundaries on his rent multiple times. And he asked whether I would just co-sign something small. Not help with co-sign. The distinction mattered, and I think he knew it mattered because he was choosing his words carefully. Co-signing meant taking legal responsibility for a debt if he did not pay it. It meant putting my name next to his, which meant putting my credit at risk. It meant that whatever he owed, I owed it too. I knew what that meant because I'd spent 16 years learning what every variation of that question cost. "No," I said. I did not soften it. I did not say maybe or let me think about it. I explained why. I told him that I had a mortgage to protect, a refinance with first federal closing in 2 months, a FICO score of 783 that I had defended for 16 years. I told him that I could not risk any of that on his promise that this was small, that it was temporary, that he understood how these things worked. I told him that I had said no before, that we had had this conversation before, and that my answer was not going to change. He sat with that. He did not argue. He did not negotiate. He did not pressure. He nodded. He said, "Okay, I get it." His face was clear. His tone suggested acceptance. He seemed, in that moment, to mean it absolutely. And in that moment, I felt something I had not felt in a long time, the specific relief of a boundary that had held. I had said no. He had accepted it. The thing I feared, that he would push, that he would appeal to our relationship, that he would frame this as a test of my love, had not happened. He had taken the no and transformed it into acceptance, and I mistook that for understanding. I sat at my kitchen counter that week and thought, he is finally growing up. He is finally internalizing what I have been trying to teach him. What I'm examining now is not his action, which was a betrayal, and which I can describe in dates and documents and forwarded emails. What I am examining is my belief in that nod. Because a nod is not a conversation. A nod is the thing someone gives you when they have agreed to stop asking you. And I had accepted it as proof that the asking was finished. I had felt the weight lift. But a nod can also mean something else. It can mean I hear you, and I'm not going to fight you, and I'm not going to ask again. It can mean I understand exactly what you will not do for me, and I'm going to find another way. It can mean I know where your boundary is, and I am going to step around it instead of through it. 8 months is a long time. And in 8 months, a person with knowledge of financial documents, a person who knows what wet signature means, what authorized representative means, what disbursement schedule means, can do a great deal of damage. What Tobias did in those 8 months was what the nod had promised. He did not ask me again. He simply used my name, which I had taught him was powerful. He used my signature, which he had learned to forge by watching me sign documents for 16 years. He used the vocabulary I had given him at my kitchen table when he was 17 years old, and he applied it to a loan application with the precision of someone who understood exactly what he was doing and why it would work. Because he was right. It would work. His mother loved him. His mother had protected him. His mother had spent 16 years teaching him that she would absorb his failures if it meant keeping the family intact. He was betting on that. And for 8 months, while I sat at the same kitchen table and believed in a nod, he was proving that he was right. The moment I understood that the letter was not going to solve itself was the moment I stopped thinking like a mother and started thinking like an auditor. The certified envelope was on my kitchen counter, and I understood that it would remain there, a fact to be processed, until I had extracted every piece of information it contained and understood what each piece meant. 48 hours after the letter arrived, I pulled my full credit report from all 3 bureaus: Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. And I printed them out, all 78 pages, on the colour printer at Crestview Medical Group. Telling Derek I was comparing rates on a medical billing platform, that was not entirely a lie. What I was doing was establishing a baseline, my history, my accounts, my addresses, every address I had ever had in the eyes of the financial system. The apartment my ex-husband and I had shared when Tobias was born. The apartment I rented alone for 2 years while I saved for a down payment. The house I bought on my own. Every mortgage refinance. Every credit card I had ever applied for. Every inquiry. Every on-time payment. Every single address. I spread the pages across my home office desk and read through them like they were evidence. Because they were. Everything was in order. Everything was clean. My FICO score had been 783 for the past 3 years, which meant I had not missed a payment, not been late, not defaulted on anything. The accounts listed were accounts I had opened myself. The inquiries were inquiries I had authorized. Meridian Credit Union did not appear anywhere in those reports until now. Until the fraudulent loan appeared on the most recent Equifax report as a 30-day late account with a balance of $28,500. Then I called Meridian Credit Union's general line and requested the complete loan file for account number 8814 Alpha. The woman who answered was trained to believe that someone calling and asking for a loan file was someone who had legitimate questions about a loan they had taken out. Oh! She did not understand, from my voice alone, that I was calling about someone else's crime. I was polite. I was professional. I was the kind of customer they wanted. Someone who was not angry, not hysterical, just methodical. I said I needed to review the full documentation, and she said the standard procedure was to mail it, and I said the standard procedure was not going to work because I needed it immediately. She put me on hold. When she came back, she offered to fax it to my office. I provided a cover sheet that afternoon. The pages began arriving at 4:15 p.m. The machine in the back office pulling them through one by one. I stood there and watched each page emerge. The loan application, the authorization of representative form, the disbursement agreement, and the notary certification page. Each piece was a separate piece of the fraud, separated from the others by the feed mechanism of the fax machine. I did not touch them until they had all arrived and cooled. Catalina walked past while I was standing there and asked if I was okay. I said yes. Just reviewing some old medical coding updates. Mum, she did not believe me. She knew me well enough to know when I was assembling something that mattered. That evening, I sat down at my dining room table with everything spread in front of me like evidence. The original certified letter from Meridian, the credit report printouts, the faxed pages from the loan file, a spiral notebook, a red pen, the overhead light on because it was after dark, and I wanted to see clearly. Catalina had texted me earlier asking if everything was okay. Apparently, I had been short with someone about a billing code that did not match a claim. I had said just a lot to process. Thank you for asking. That was how Catalina and I understood that I did not want to talk about it yet. The loan application came first. I read it slowly. My name printed on line 1, my address on lines 2 through 4. The address was correct. It was my address. Cuyahoga County, a house I owned, a mortgage I was paying, the zip code, the street. All of it was mine. Everything about this page was mine except the signature on the bottom and the person who had written it. The date of the application was February 7th, 2026. A Saturday. I opened my calendar, the one I keep in both my work email and my personal email, because I am meticulous about knowing where I am supposed to be. And I looked at February 7th. I had written Farmers Market, 10 a.m. The receipt was still in my wallet. I had not cleaned out my wallet in 2 weeks. I pulled it out and looked at it. Riverside Farmers Market, February 7th, 2026, 10:17 a.m. Spinach, honey, $13.42. The farmer's market was on Route 8 in Cuyahoga County, 3 miles from my house. It was not 3 miles from any Meridian Credit Union branch. I could not have been at the farmer's market at 10:17 a.m. and signed a loan application that same day. The math did not work. The timeline did not work. I was not there. Next, the authorization of representative form. Tobias Osei, authorized representative with full power of attorney to manage the account. The form was signed the same day as the application, February 7th. The signature was mine, and it was not mine. The letters were similar. The capital R had the right flourish, but the slant was wrong. The right side of the signature leaned forward differently than I lean. My signature pulls slightly backward at the end, a habit I've had since I was 9 years old. Well, something about the way my mother taught me to hold a pen. This signature pushed forward into space as if it was in a hurry. I looked at it for 3 minutes without touching it. I made a note in the spiral notebook. Signature doesn't match hand. Slant forward, not back. Not my writing. Then the disbursement agreement. The money leaving the account. The $28,500 becoming real movement in the financial system. Or actual dollars moving from a credit union account into someone's bank account. I found the disbursement details on a separate page. $18,200 had been disbursed immediately. The remaining $9,300 was being held. I made another note. Where did $18,000 go? Follow the money. That was how you did this. You followed the paper trail. You found where the money had landed. You traced it back to the decision that had been made to spend it. I was about to close the disbursement agreement when I saw it. The notary stamp. I stopped reading. I sat back in my chair. I did not move for several seconds. The notary was from Summit County, and not Cuyahoga County. Summit County is the next county over, reachable in 30 minutes if you take I-77 north. But it is another jurisdiction entirely. It is another place with different processes and different requirements. And every address in my financial life. My mortgage with First Federal, my employer Crestview Medical Group, my bank accounts, the mortgage refinance paperwork sitting in a folder next to my laptop right now. Every single address was in Cuyahoga County. I had never done business in Summit County. I had no notary relationship in Summit County. I had no reason to drive to Summit County on February 7th, 2026, when I was buying spinach 3 miles from home. I opened the spiral notebook to a blank page. I drew a line down the center with the red pen. On the left side, I wrote Cuyahoga County in block letters, and I listed every address associated with me, my house, my employer, my bank, the mortgage company. On the right side, I wrote Summit County and wrote the notary stamp address, the address that appeared on a document I had never signed, on a date I could not have been there. The line I drew was clean. It was absolute. It was the line between what belonged to me and what did not. I circled the discrepancy once with the red pen. That circle was for Patricia Holt, the attorney I would call in the morning. That circle said, here is what is not in order. Here is what does not match. Here is the place where the document breaks under scrutiny. Here is the forensic error that proves the crime. Then I circled it again, drawing the circle more slowly the second time, letting the pen sit against the paper for a moment longer. That second circle was for me. That circle was me acknowledging that I had just seen the precise point where my son's crime became legally undeniable. Not the signature. Signatures can be disputed, can be attributed to stress, can be blamed on trembling hands or poor light or 100 other things. But jurisdiction, an address, a county, a notary stamp from a place I had never been. That was the place where his story could not hold. That was the point where the documentation would begin to crumble on its own, where the fraud would expose itself not through my argument, but through its own procedural impossibility. I sat at that table at 11:47 p.m. Ma'am! Looking at the 2 circles I had drawn around that Summit County address in red pen. And I understood something about the difference between evidence and proof. The evidence was everything. The forged signature, the original loan application, the date that did not match my location, the farmer's market receipt proving I was 3 miles away. But proof was something else. Proof was the place where the system itself broke. Proof was the notary stamp from a county I had never been to. I wrote one more line in the spiral notebook, below the circles, in capital letters. Call Meridian tomorrow. Ask about notary commission date. I did not know yet why that date mattered. I just knew, from 22 years of cross-referencing financial documents, that notaries had commissions. Commissions expired. Commissions were matters of public record. If something was out of place, if something did not belong, then the reason it did not belong was usually written down somewhere. Filed in some office in some county. And if it was written down, it could be found. I closed the notebook. I pushed all the documents to the side of the table. I sat there in the overhead light for another 10 minutes. Not moving, not thinking about anything in particular, just existing in the space between the evidence I had found and the understanding of what it meant. Tobias had gone to Summit County on a Saturday that I could account for hour by hour. He had found a notary. He had forged my signature in front of that notary. He had completed a loan application under my name. He had listed himself as the authorized representative, and then he had waited for the money to arrive. He had not thought that I would look. He had bet on my love being the kind of love that does not investigate its own child. He had been right about that, once, but something had shifted the moment the certified envelope arrived. And I understood, sitting at that table with the red circles drawn in my spiral notebook, that the love and the investigation were no longer the same thing. The $18,200 did not stay abstract for very long. Following money is a particular skill, one that 22 years of accounts payable had honed into something close to instinct. A loan gets disbursed. That money has to go somewhere. It moves from a credit union account to a bank account. And from there, it moves to a purchase. And from there, it is converted into something tangible. A vehicle, a down payment on a house, a semester of tuition. The money that was never yours becomes someone else's foundation for a future they wanted but could not afford. I called the loan servicer on Wednesday morning and asked for the disbursement details, the routing number, the account where the $18,200 had been sent. The woman who answered said she could not provide account information, which was correct procedure, but she could tell me the date of disbursement and the amount, February 8th, 2026, one day after the application. The money had left Meridian Credit Union on February 8th, which meant Tobias had been waiting for the funding to clear before he spent it. He had patience. Then, he had discipline. He had a plan. From there, I went to the county clerk's office on a Tuesday afternoon. The registration database was public. I could search by name, by VIN, by registration number. I searched by Tobias Osei and stood at the public terminal with my hands on the keyboard, not quite believing what would come back. 3 vehicles appeared on the screen, all registered to him. 2 I did not recognize. The third was a 2024 Dodge Charger. Black exterior, red leather interior, according to the registration. Registered to Tobias Osei on February 10th, 2026. 2 days after the disbursement, 2 days after money that bore my name and signature left a credit union and landed in an account that could be converted to a down payment at a Precision Auto Group dealership where my son worked. I printed the registration at the public printer and waited for the page to emerge. It was warm when it came out, still slightly damp from the machine. I held it and read the details twice, as if the second reading might change what the first reading had proven. It did not. The registration was clear. The dates were clear. The vehicle identification number matched something that had been parked in my driveway. I sat in my car in the county clerk's parking lot for 11 minutes after I printed the registration. I did not start the engine. I did not cry. I did not do anything except sit there and look at the document that proved my son had taken $18,200 of my credit and converted it into a car that had been parked in my driveway 3 times since February. 3 separate occasions when I had stood next to it and touched it and complimented it without understanding what I was standing next to. The first time was a Saturday in March. He had come by for dinner. And afterward, as I was clearing the table, he had asked if I wanted to see his new car. I remember the particular tone of his voice. Something like excitement, but also something careful underneath it, like he was waiting to see if I would be proud. I went outside with him into the cool evening, and he showed it to me with something that looked like genuine pride. A 2024 Dodge Charger, black exterior, gleaming under the streetlight. He had just detailed it himself. He said he had done the detailing at the dealership, spending his Saturday morning on the paint and the trim. I walked around the car slowly. I touched the hood. The metal was warm from the day. I asked him where he had gotten it, and he said he had been saving up, that the dealership had given him a good rate because he was an employee. The financing was simple. He said a dealership loan. He was making the payments himself. I asked him how much the monthly payment was, and he said it was manageable, that he could handle it on his salary. I told him the car was beautiful. I told him I was proud of him. I remember thinking, he is finally figuring it out. He is becoming someone who owns nice things because he has earned them. The pattern is breaking. The second time was 2 weeks later, in late March. He had asked if I wanted to go to lunch with him, and I said yes. He drove. I sat in the passenger seat and felt the leather of the interior, and I asked him how much the monthly payment was. He said again that it was manageable. He said he was managing his money better now. He was thinking about the future. I complimented the way the interior smelled. That particular new car smell mixed with the leather conditioner he had used. I complimented the sound the engine made. I remember thinking, he is settling down. He is becoming someone who owns nice things because he earned them, and he is responsible enough to care for them. The third time was in April. He had mentioned something about getting an oil change, and I had asked about the car. And he had shown me again, though more briefly. We did not have lunch that time. He had just wanted me to see that he was maintaining it, that he was taking care of it the way an owner should. I had not asked more questions. I had assumed I already knew the answer to how he had acquired it. I had told myself that my son was succeeding, that the bailouts were behind us, that the years of watching him struggle were finally over. 11 minutes in a parking lot is not a long time to process the fact that you have been complimenting the physical evidence of your son's crime. 11 minutes is not long enough to reconcile the mother who thought her son was succeeding with the mother who now understood that his success was built on her name, her signature, her credit, her financial security. Every compliment I had given him about the car was a compliment to the concrete proof of his decision to use me. I drove home, though I did not go home. I stayed in the car on Riverside Avenue and called Catalina. I had not called anyone else yet. I had not told anyone except Craig Mallet at the credit union, and he was handling it as a case number, a reference that would appear in police reports and attorney files. But Catalina was my friend, and I needed to say it out loud to someone who knew me well enough to understand what it meant. "He used my name," I said. My voice was steady. I was still in the car, still on Riverside, still holding the county clerk's registration in my free hand. There was a beat. Catalina did not rush to respond. She did not say anything like, "Oh my God," or "I cannot believe he would do that." She just paused, and in that pause was the weight of understanding what I was saying. Then she said, "Renata, stop driving. Pull over." "I already pulled over," I said. "Are you safe?" "Yes." "Tell me what happened." "He went to a credit union and he filled out an application with my name on it. He signed my signature. He got $28,500. He spent $18,200 of it on a car, a 2024 Dodge Charger. He registered it to himself. He parked it in my driveway. 3 times he parked it in my driveway and showed it to me, and I complimented it." Catalina was quiet. Then she said, "Where are you right now?" "Riverside." "I am texting you an address. It is Patricia Holt's office. She is a lawyer who handles fraud cases. I gave you her card 6 months ago. Do you still have it?" "I did. Patricia Holt was a consumer fraud and identity theft attorney." Catalina had given me the card when Catalina's sister had a problem with a credit card company. I had kept the card in my desk drawer at work, in a small envelope with other business cards I had collected over the years and never used. I had never thought I would need Patricia Holt. I had never imagined a scenario where I would need to call an attorney about fraud committed by my own son. "I have it," I said. "Go there now. Not home. Directly there. Do not stop anywhere else. Just go." I drove there without thinking about anything except the directions. I drove the way I drove to work, on autopilot, following the blue line on my phone's map. When I arrived at Patricia Holt's office, I had every document with me because I had not left them at home. The original letter from Meridian, the credit report, the loan application with the forged signature, the disbursement agreement, the notary certification page from Summit County, the county clerk's vehicle registration, the farmer's market receipt dated February 7th, proving I was 3 miles away, the red pen from my spiral notebook with the 2 circles drawn around the notary address. I had brought everything. Patricia Holt was in her 50s and wore reading glasses on a beaded chain. She did not ask me why I was there. She asked me to sit down and tell her what had happened. I laid out every document on her desk in the order it had arrived, and I explained the timeline. I showed her the notary stamp from Summit County and explained why that discrepancy mattered. That I had lived in Cuyahoga County my entire financial life. That I had never been to Summit County. That the notary had gone to a county I did not go to, and had notarized a signature I did not write. I showed her the vehicle registration. I showed her the farmer's market receipt. I showed her the dates. Patricia listened without interrupting. She did not take notes. She did not express shock or sympathy. She just listened while I moved through every layer of the fraud, every piece of evidence I had gathered, every document that proved that my son had taken my name and my signature and my credit and converted them into a down payment on a car that he had been proud enough to show me 3 times. Certain that his mother's love was structural, permanent, load-bearing, without a flaw. When I finished, Patricia took off her reading glasses and set them on the desk next to the loan application. She looked at me directly. She said 2 sentences. "You have done most of my job already. Now, let me tell you what we can do." The moment I understood that I had evidence was the moment I understood that I could not use it immediately. Patricia Holt had explained this in her office after I finished laying out every document. Documentation without admission is a civil matter. A civil suit that requires proof from banking records and forensic analysis, and the kind of extended litigation that would drag through years and cost money, I did not have. But documentation paired with admission, his voice, his own words, saying what he did and why, recorded in a form that cannot be retracted or reframed, that transforms the entire calculus, that gives prosecutors something they can use, that turns a civil dispute into a criminal matter. I could have called him that night. I could have confronted Tobias when the anger was fresh and the evidence was sharp and undeniable. I could have demanded an explanation and listened to him minimize and deflect the way he always had, the way he had learned to do so well that I had been believing his minimizations for years. But if I did that, I would have given him the chance to prepare a story that fit the evidence he knew I had. He would have had weeks to construct a narrative. He would have had time to decide what he was willing to admit and what he would blame on someone else. Maybe Vanessa Pruitt, the notary who had stamped a document she did not watch being signed. Maybe the credit union for being careless with their fraud prevention. Maybe me for not monitoring my credit more carefully. Instead, I chose to become very quiet. 11 days. That was the time between the moment I pulled the vehicle registration from the county clerk's office and the Sunday dinner I would stage in my own home. 11 days of answering his texts as if nothing had changed. "Hey, Mum, you busy this weekend?" Normal? Casual? The kind of text he sent every few weeks when he was thinking about family or when he needed something. I replied the way I always replied, with warmth, with availability, with the open door he had learned to expect from me. I did not write anything different. I did not suggest that something was wrong. I performed normalcy with the precision of someone who had spent 22 years in accounts payable managing difficult conversations. And I had learned how to discuss catastrophe with the same tone I use to discuss the weather. There was a family dinner on Friday, the week after I had seen the charger registration at the county clerk's office. My ex-husband was going to be there. We see each other occasionally, for Tobias's sake, maintaining the fiction that divorce doesn't mean complete severance from the other parent's life. The dinner was at a restaurant, neutral ground, the kind of place where tension is managed by the presence of servers and other patrons. I sat across from my ex-husband. Tobias sat across from me, I watched my son eating, and I did not tell him that I knew. I did not let anything change in my face or my voice. I had developed a particular skill, the ability to discuss billing discrepancies with people who were trying to steal from the medical group, to discuss their fraudulent claims with the same neutral tone I might use to comment on the temperature outside. I watched my son smile at me that Friday night, and I smiled back. I asked him about work. He told me about a customer who had come into Precision Auto Group looking for a Dodge Charger, just like the one he had. "Imagine that," he said. "Somebody wanted exactly what I have." He said it with a kind of wonder, as if his own good fortune were proof of his judgment. I said that must have meant he had made a good choice. He said he thought so. He had no idea that the thing he owned was the physical evidence of his crime, and that his mother was sitting across the table from him, knowing this fact, pretending she did not. When he left that evening, he hugged me goodbye the way he always did. His arms around me, my arms around him, the embrace lasting the usual amount of time, not too short, which would have signaled something was wrong, not too long, which would have been unusual. I held him normally, and I let him leave without any indication that the next time I saw him, I would be recording him. That was the discipline it required. Not anger, not tears, not the theatrical confrontation that would have felt true to the moment. Just normalcy. Just the performance of a mother who did not know that her son had taken her name, and her signature, and her credit, and converted it into a car he could show her with pride. 11 days. I went to work. I reviewed billing codes and claim denials. I recorded my conversations with medical providers who were trying to reverse charges they knew they should not reverse. I maintained the pattern of my life, as if nothing had changed. I answered Tobias's texts. I did not call Patricia Holt and ask if I should wait longer, because I already knew the answer. I did not tell Catalina what I was planning, because she would have tried to warn me about the emotional toll of looking my son in the eye and pretending I did not know what I knew. She would have been right. But I had made a choice. And the choice required absolute silence. On Sunday, I called him. "Come for dinner," I said. My voice carried nothing. Not warmth, not cold. Just the ordinary request of a mother to her son. I told him what I was making. "Your favorite," I said. "The chicken you used to love when you were 8. He said yes immediately. He said he would be there at 6. He did not pause. He did not express surprise that I was calling him on a Sunday with an invitation. He simply said yes, the way he always did, secure in the knowledge that his mother's home was open to him, that his mother's table was a place where he was always welcome, that his mother's love was the one thing he did not have to earn. I set the table the way I set it for every Sunday dinner. The china with the blue pattern running around the rim. The silverware in the correct order. The water glasses filled with ice. I did not set it hastily. I did not set it as a stage for confrontation. I said it the way I have said it for years. Because the appearance of normalcy was the only thing that would make him believe that nothing had changed. I set his place across from me so that I could see his face clearly when he was sitting across the table. I cooked the chicken the way he had loved it since he was a child. Marinated in buttermilk and lemon overnight. Fried in a cast iron skillet until the outside was golden and the inside was tender. The way my own mother had taught me to make it when I was younger than Tobias was now. I made the green beans with bacon. I made the rice. I made the cornbread that he asked for every time he came home. Every element of this meal was something he had known his entire life, something that carried the weight of years and consistency, and the particular form of love that mothers express through food prepared with attention. I charged my phone to 100%. I did this matter-of-factly, the way I would charge it before any workday that mattered. The battery needed to be full because the conversation needed to be complete, and I did not want to lose any part of it to a phone that died halfway through his confession. Batteries have failed me before. Documentation has been lost before. I was not going to let that happen. At 5:50, I opened the voice memo app on my phone. This is the same app I have used for every billing dispute that comes through my office. Every conversation with a medical provider who is trying to reverse a claim they know they should not reverse. Every instance where I need to protect myself against someone who will later claim that something different was said. For 22 years, I have recorded these calls because the calls are my evidence, and evidence without documentation is just a story someone tells later. And stories change depending on who is telling them and what they need to be true. My supervisor once called my voice memo log the most organized thing in this building. He said it as a compliment, though I understood what he meant, that I was obsessive about preservation, about not letting anything disappear into the haze of a conversation that might have been different from what I remembered. That obsession had built an archive of hundreds of recorded conversations about billing codes and claim denials, and the various ways that people try to shift the truth when their money is on the line. That same obsession was about to be turned on my own son. I pressed record. The app registered the timestamp. The small red dot appeared on the screen, indicating that audio was being captured. I set the phone down in my lap, hidden under the edge of the table where he could not see it. I was not hiding it out of shame. I was hiding it the way I hide my voice recording app in every conversation where I need protection. Which is to say, I was protecting myself. I could hear the sound of his car in the driveway, the distinctive engine of the Dodge Charger, the one I had complimented 3 times, the one I had stood next to with my hand on the hood and told him he had done well, the one that was the physical proof of what he had done to me. He knocked on the door. The knock was familiar, the way he always knocked. I stood up. I opened the door. My face was composed. My voice was steady. I said, "Come in. I made your favorite." And I watched him walk into the kitchen, into the home I had built alone, into the place where his mother was about to hold him accountable for the first time in his life, recorded in his own voice, in his own words, in a form that he could not later claim he had misunderstood or that I had misremembered. The red dot on my phone continued to record. He arrived at 6:05, 5 minutes after the time I had told him to come. This was typical. Punctuality had never been his strong suit. I heard his car in the driveway. The Charger, of course, the engine distinctive. The sound of it pulling into my drive, a particular reminder of what I was about to do. I was standing at my kitchen sink, my hands in warm soapy water, and I was aware of the specific performance I was enacting. A mother simply waiting for her son to arrive for dinner. A woman with nothing on her mind except the meal that was already prepared. the table that was already set, the comfort that was already in place. I dried my hands on a dish towel. I did not check the phone in my pocket. I already knew it was recording. I had pressed that button 30 minutes ago. Before I heard his car, before I heard the knock, before any of this began. He came through the door the way he always did, without knocking, the way he had been coming through this door since he was 9 years old. And I had taught him that this house was his house, that he did not need to ask permission to enter, that there was no threshold between us that required ceremony or caution. Hey, Mum, he said. He kissed my cheek. He smelled like cologne, something expensive that he had started wearing in the past year. Something that suggested he was thinking about how he presented himself to the world, about the impression he made on people he wanted to impress. Hi, honey, you're right on time. I said, this was a small lie. He was 5 minutes late, but I said it with warmth, as if his arrival was exactly what I had expected, as if his timing was perfect, as if nothing in the world had shifted between the last time I saw him and this moment. This is the first thing I needed him to believe, that nothing had changed, that his mother was still the woman who welcomed him without question, who asked no conditions, who simply set a table and cooked a meal and opened her home to him as if he were the most important thing in her life. The kitchen smelled like the chicken, the buttermilk and lemon that I had marinated it in overnight, the cast iron skillet where it had been fried golden at exactly the right temperature, the green beans with bacon that were keeping warm on the stove. The rice was finished. The table was set with the china with the blue pattern running around the rim, the silverware in the correct order, the water glasses filled with ice. He sat across from me. This was deliberate. I needed to see his face clearly when everything changed. You're cooking my favorite, he said. He said it with warmth, with the specific gratitude that comes from knowing you are remembered, that the person who loves you is paying attention to the particular details of what brings you comfort. This is the chicken. It's the chicken, I confirmed. I plated the food with care. I was aware, in that moment, of being in two different places at once, and this duality would not disappear for the entire evening. I was in the kitchen, my hands moving with the precision I had developed over 4 decades of cooking, of knowing exactly how to portion a plate so that it was generous, but not excessive. I was also above the kitchen, watching myself work, cataloguing the movements of the woman at the stove, the woman whose phone was in her pocket, recording every word that was about to be spoken in this room. I was a mother and a woman protecting herself. I was a woman holding her son accountable. I was both of these things at the same time, and this split consciousness would define every moment of the evening. We began to eat. The food was good. He took bites. He seemed to relax into the familiarity of it. I watched him eat, and I was aware of watching myself watch him eat. How are things at the dealership? I asked. This was a natural question. This was the kind of question a mother asks. But it was also the first of several questions designed to move him gradually toward a specific date, a specific moment, a specific truth. He said things were good. He said summer was busy, that people were buying cars before the school year started. He said he was making commission on several sales a week. He said he was doing better than he ever had. As he spoke, I could see his ease. I could see the way he settled into this dinner. Into the knowledge that his mother was interested in him, that she wanted to know how his life was going, that she was proud of him. "Are you enjoying the car life?" I asked. "I remember you used to talk about working at a dealership where you could get a good rate on a vehicle." "Yeah, it's been great," he said. "I got to know the inventory, and there's actually a lot of opportunity there. People respect you if you work at a place like that." I cut another piece of chicken. I was studying his face as he spoke, cataloguing the specific moments where his expression shifted, where he was being genuine and where he was being careful. "Did you ever end up getting that car you were looking at?" I asked. This question was positioned as if I was asking about a casual conversation we had had weeks ago. Some passing mention of a vehicle he had been considering. Something I had filed away in the way mothers file away the details of their children's lives. The truth was that I knew exactly which car he was talking about. I knew the make, the model, the year, the color. I knew the registration number. I knew that it had been purchased with $18,200 that had been disbursed from a loan application bearing my forged signature. I knew that he had driven that car into my driveway 3 times and shown it to me, and I had complimented it, believing it was the evidence of his success rather than the evidence of his crime. "Yeah, actually," he said. His face brightened. He set his fork down. "I got the Charger, the one I told you about, the black one with the red interior. Remember when I showed you? That first time in March?" "I do remember," I said. "You seemed really proud of it." "I am," he said. "It's the nicest car I've ever owned. I'm taking good care of it. I'm making the payments on time. The financing came through really smooth from the dealership." This last sentence landed in the space between us, and I was aware of its weight. Aware of the way he was offering me a version of the truth that was incomplete. The financing had come through from a dealership. Yes, but the down payment had come from a credit union loan taken out in my name. He was telling me the truth about the dealership financing while simultaneously omitting the truth about the money that had started the entire process. I took another bite of chicken. I did not rush to fill the silence. I had learned over the course of managing difficult conversations in my professional life that silence is a tool. Silence creates space. Silence makes people want to fill it. Silence makes people say things they might not otherwise say. Reveals things they were hoping to keep hidden. "I'm glad you're taking care of it," I said finally. My voice was warm. My voice was normal. My voice gave no indication of what I was doing, what I had been doing since I heard his car pull into the driveway. "That's important." He seemed to relax again. "We talked about other things. His apartment, whether the lease was coming up for renewal, his father, and how we had seen each other at that family dinner the week before. Whether he was seeing anyone." These were the things mothers ask. These were the ordinary questions of a mother interested in the ordinary details of her son's life. And I was a mother asking these things, while simultaneously being a woman with a phone in her pocket, recording every word, waiting for the moment when he would realize what was happening. The first 30 minutes of the recording was like this: small talk and a meal, and the gradual narrowing of every topic toward a single date without me ever naming it. We talked about the summer heat. We talked about whether he was saving money. I asked him about his co-workers. I asked him if he was planning any trips. Every question moved him closer to February, closer to the date when the loan application had been submitted, so closer to the moment when he would have to confront what he had done. But I never named February. I never said the date. I never gave him the opportunity to prepare a story that fit the evidence he knew I had. He continued to eat. I continued to eat. We were in the gradual narrowing that I had planned. Though he did not know this, I was aware of the woman across the table from me. My son, who I had raised alone, who I had taken to Saturday morning soccer games, who I had taught the vocabulary of financial documents at my kitchen table when he was 17 years old. I was aware of him as he was in this moment. A man of 27 who was sitting in his mother's kitchen, eating her chicken, telling her stories about his life, secure in the knowledge that this place was safe, that his mother's love was unconditional, that there was nothing he could do that would change the fact that I would open my door to him. And then, mid-sentence, he was telling me something about a customer who had come into the dealership. He stopped. His voice simply stopped, mid-word, as if he had suddenly realized something. His face changed, not dramatically, not with shock or fear, just a subtle shift, a fraction of understanding. But it was enough. It was the moment when he understood that something was different, that this dinner was not the ordinary Sunday dinner, that his mother was asking questions that were not ordinary questions, that he was being led somewhere, and he had only just realized it. "Wait," he said. His voice was different now. It had lost some of its ease, some of the comfort it had carried when he first sat down. "Did you get a letter?" I set my fork down slowly. I looked at him directly across the table with the blue-rimmed china between us. I did not reach for the phone in my pocket. I already knew it was running. I already knew that every word I was about to say was being captured, recorded, preserved in a form that could not be retracted or reframed or rewritten later. "Tell me about the letter, Tobias," I said, and I watched my son understand, in that moment, that the one place in his life that had never had conditions on it, the one person who had absorbed every failure without question, the one relationship he had learned to rely on without consequence, was no longer going to work the way he had believed it worked. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at me across the table, and for the first time in his life, he was in the presence of his mother, as someone who was not going to protect him from the consequences of what he had done. "I was going to pay it back," he said. This was his opening move, not an apology, not a full confession. Just the assertion that he had planned to handle this himself, that I would never have found out if he had managed to keep up with the payments. As if that was the point, as if the crime was the debt, not the taking. I waited. I did not fill the silence with anger or disappointment. I just set my hands on the table and looked at him, and I let the silence sit between us like a third person. "I know it looks bad," he said, "but I had a plan. I was going to make the payments from the commissions. I didn't think it would be a big deal." "Tell me how you got the loan," I said. My voice was quiet. My voice was steady. The phone in my pocket was still recording. He shifted in his chair. He had stopped eating. The chicken was still on his plate, mostly finished. The green beans pushed to the side. His hands were on the table now too, and I noticed that they were not quite still. "I went online," he said. "I filled out an application to Meridian Credit Union. They approved it really fast. The money was in an account within 2 days." "What account?" I asked. "An account I opened at a different bank, just for the down payment money. Once I got the funds transferred, I moved them to the dealership for the car." This was the first real detail. Not a minimization. Not a deflection. Just a factual description of the mechanics of the transaction, as if opening an account and receiving a transfer from a loan taken out in someone else's name was a standard part of financing a vehicle. "And the loan application," I said. "Walk me through what you put on the application." He hesitated. This was the moment where he understood that I was not going to accept the simple version, that I was going to need to hear from his mouth, in his own voice, the specific steps he had taken to commit this crime. "I used your name," he said. His voice was quieter now. It was the voice of someone who has crossed a threshold and cannot uncross it. "Your social security number, your address, everything that would make it look like you were the one applying." "Everything," I repeated. "Yes," he said. "All of it." I picked up my water glass. I took a sip. The water was cold, but I was aware of the phone in my pocket recording every word, every inflection, every moment of this confession. I was aware of being suspended in 2 different experiences. The mother listening to her son explain his crime, and the woman documenting evidence that would eventually be heard by prosecutors. "And the signature," I said. "How did you handle the signature part?" He was quiet for a moment. He was looking at his hands on the table. "I practiced it," he said. "Your signature. I practiced until it was close enough." "Close enough?" I repeated. I was not accusing him. I was not expressing anger. I was simply stating what he had said, letting the words exist in the space between us, letting them hang there in their full implication. "How long did you practice?" "I don't know. A few hours, maybe. I had some of your documents, old letters, checks. I copied it over and over until I thought I could do it without looking at a reference. And then you signed the application with my forged signature." "Yes," he said. "And then what?" "And then I needed it notarized," he continued. This is where he revealed the second person, Vanessa Pruitt. He said her name without hesitation, as if she was not someone whose career could be damaged by what she had done, whose professional license could be jeopardized, whose name would now be part of a fraud investigation. "She worked at Precision Auto Group. We knew each other. I asked if she could help me. I said I needed someone to stamp a document." "Did you tell her the signature was forged?" I asked. "No," he said quickly. "I told her it was a formality. I said you had asked me to handle some paperwork for a loan application. I said you had authorized me to manage it. She stamped it. She didn't ask a lot of questions." This was the minimization of someone else's complicity. He was reframing her involvement as innocence, as if her not asking questions made her less responsible for what she had done. It was the same logic he had used with me for years. If I didn't ask questions, then I wasn't responsible for what happened. If I didn't explicitly tell him no, then no was not what he had heard. "Where did you get the notarization done?" I asked. "Summit County," he said. "There's a notary office up there. I just walked in and asked if they could help. They didn't ask questions. This was important. He had gone to Summit County deliberately. He had not used a notary in Cuyahoga County, where I lived, where all my addresses were listed, where every piece of my financial life was rooted. He had driven to another county to find someone who would not recognize me, who would not be able to verify that the woman standing in front of her was actually me. On a Saturday, I said. It was not a question. On a Saturday in February, he confirmed. February 7th, I took a morning off from work. I drove up there early, got the notarization. The loan was approved the next day. February 7th, the Saturday when I was at the farmer's market buying spinach and honey. The Saturday when I had a receipt time-stamped at 10:17, placing me 3 miles away from any Meridian Credit Union branch. The Saturday when I was existing in my actual life while my son was in another county, with another notary, using my forged signature to begin the process of taking $28,500 that did not belong to him. And once you had the loan money, I said, what happened next? I transferred the funds, he said. Like I said, $18,200 went to Precision Auto for the down payment on the Charger. The rest is still in the account. It's still available. I haven't touched it. As if that mattered. As if the money sitting in an account somewhere made the crime less real, less intentional, less damaging to my credit and my financial security and my future. Why the Charger specifically? I asked. Because it was the car I wanted, he said. He said it simply, as if this was obvious, as if wanting something was sufficient justification for taking it. Because I work at a dealership, and I wanted to have something nice. Because I wanted people to see that I was doing okay. I was aware, in this moment, of the specific irony of his confession. He was using language that I had given him. When he said down payment, it was the vocabulary of financial transactions, the vocabulary I had spent 16 years learning to master. When he described filling out the authorization form, when he spoke about the authorized representative, he was using the exact terms that I had taught him to use, that I had made him repeat at my kitchen table when he was 17 years old. Walk me through the authorization form, I said. He was hesitant. He understood what I was doing. He understood that I was not asking for information. I was asking him to use his own words to describe how he had used the tools I had given him against me. I signed you as the authorizing party, he said. I used the official form from Meridian, the one that gives someone power of attorney over the account. I put my name as the authorized representative. I put myself as the person who would have access to manage the account. What terms did you use? I asked. When you were describing that form to yourself, what did you call it? The authorization form, he said. And what makes the authorization form important? I asked. In the context of a loan agreement? He was very still. He understood what I was asking. He understood that I was making him articulate the exact lesson I had taught him. The authorization form is where the power is, he said quietly. It's where you designate who has access. It's where you make it official who can manage the account. Wet signature. That was the phrase. That was the term I had forced him to define at my kitchen table, making him understand that a signature written in front of a notary, witnessed and stamped, was the most binding form of authorization. That it was the place where someone could lose control of something if they were not paying attention. I thought you understood, he said. His voice had shifted. It was no longer the tone of someone explaining. It was the tone of someone who was moving into justification, into the appeal. I thought you of all people would understand what I was trying to do. You've built everything from nothing. You know what it takes. I did not respond. I picked up my water glass and drank. I was going to fix it, he continued. I was going to make the payments. You would never have known. It would have worked out. It would have worked out, I repeated. Yes, he said, because I was going to take care of it. You said no to co-signing, but you would have said yes if you'd seen the full picture. You always say yes when you understand what I'm trying to do. This was the moment where I understood the exact architecture of his entitlement. It was not that he believed I owed him money. It was that he believed I owed him the opportunity to explain myself after the fact. He believed that my love was the kind of love that would absorb anything, that would forgive anything, that would eventually understand that he was really trying to make something of himself, and that he just needed his mother to get on board with his plan after he had already executed it. I watched how you handle money my whole life, he continued. He was building towards something now, toward the thing he really believed to be true. I watched you work, and I watched you manage everything alone. I thought you would understand what I was trying to do. I thought you would get it. I thought you would see that I was trying to build something. Build something, I said. My voice was still quiet. My voice was still controlled. The recording was still running. A life, he said. A future. A car. Something that showed I was okay. Something that showed I was doing better. And there it was. Not the crime, not the forgery, not the fraud. The thing he actually cared about was that people saw him as someone who was doing okay. He had used my name, and my signature, and my credit to purchase the appearance of success. He had taken my identity to create an illusion of his own competence. You're not going to turn your own son in, he said. His voice was different now. It was softer. It carried a certainty that was born from 16 years of never facing a consequence from me, of always having me absorb whatever he could not manage on his own. That's not who you are. That's not what a mother does. I did not answer. I set my water glass down on the table. The chicken was cold now. The green beans were cold. The dinner I had cooked with such care, with such intention, was becoming inedible. You would protect me, he said. It was not a question anymore. It was a statement. It was an assertion of what he believed to be true about his mother, about the kind of woman I was, about the kind of love I had and the obligations that came with it. The recording continued. The small red dot on my phone was still capturing every word. I had not spoken since he had made his assertion. I had just sat there, water glass in hand, and let him fill the silence with his justification, his minimization, his threat, his absolute certainty that I would protect him because I had always protected him. I picked up my water glass again. I looked at the water inside it, clear and cold. I took another sip, and I did not answer. That night, I sent Patricia Holt the recording, just the file, No explanation needed. One message below it. He covered everything. She called back within an hour. She did not waste time with pleasantries or caution. "I've listened to the first 30 minutes, she said. Her voice was different now. Not warmer exactly, but certain in a way that certainty sounds when you have the evidence you need. "This is exactly what we need. I'm filing the complaint first thing tomorrow morning. Can you have the documents compiled? The original letter, the loan application, the vehicle registration, the notary stamp, the location data, all of it, ready to attach by 7 Ma'am, I said I could. I said they were already organized in a folder on my desktop, labeled in the order they would need to be presented. "Of course they are," she said. "That's what I expected from you. Get some sleep. This is going to move quickly now." I did not sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with all the documents spread out in front of me, and I read through them again. The certified letter from Meridian, the loan application with Tobias's handwriting visible on my forged signature, the authorization form listing him as the authorized representative, the disbursement agreement showing the $18,200 movement, the county clerk's registration for the 2024 Dodge Charger. All of it. All of the evidence of what my son had done, compiled and organized as if I'd been expecting to need it someday. Within 72 hours, Holt and Associates filed a formal fraud complaint with Meridian Credit Union's fraud department. Attached to that complaint was everything I'd gathered, the complete 47-minute recording of Tobias describing his crime in his own voice, describing the application process, describing driving to Summit County on a Saturday morning, describing how he had practiced my signature until it was close enough. Also attached were the forged documents themselves, the loan application, the authorization of representative form, the disbursement agreement. Also attached were the critical details, the Summit County notary stamp that proved he had gone to a county I had never been to, the February 7th location data from my cell phone placing me at the farmer's market 3 miles away from any Meridian Credit Union branch, the county clerk's vehicle registration showing that the $18,200 from the loan had been converted into a down payment on a car registered to my son. This was the evidence. This was the proof. This was the documentation that would allow a fraud investigator to see, without any possibility of misinterpretation, exactly what had happened and who had made it happen. Craig Mallet called me 2 days later. This time, he did not open by treating me as a potential co-conspirator, the way he had the first time. This time, his voice had changed. He sounded different. He sounded like a man who had listened to a recording and understood that he had initially misjudged the person on the other end of the phone. "Ms. Osei, I've reviewed the recording and the supporting documentation. But," he said, "I want to apologize for my initial approach to this matter. What we have here is unambiguous identity theft and loan fraud. Your son took out a loan in your name without your knowledge or consent. He forged your signature. He used the proceeds to purchase a vehicle. The evidence you've provided is comprehensive and precise." I did not respond. I was aware of the specific feeling of being believed, of having my documentation accepted without question, of not having to convince an authority figure that I was telling the truth about my own life. It was a feeling I was not accustomed to. "I've done some additional investigation on my end," Mallet continued. "The notary who stamped the application, her name is Vanessa Pruitt. I obtained her notary commission records. Her commission lapsed in December 2024. The loan application was submitted in February 2026. That means she had been operating with an expired commission for 14 months. That means the notary stamp on your son's application is invalid. That means the application is fraudulent on its face, separate from the forged signature. The credit union has no standing to pursue this loan against you. The application is void. 14 months. The notary's commission had lapsed before Tobias ever approached her. She had been stamping documents with credentials that were no longer valid, and Tobias had chosen exactly that notary. Whether by chance or by design, I would never know. But the procedural defect was absolute. The application could not stand. The credit union could not pursue me for a single dollar of the balance. We're going to remove the loan from your credit report. Mallet said, I'm expediting it. You should see the notation deleted within 7 business days. That gives you a cushion before your refinance closing. 7 business days. My refinance closing at First Federal was scheduled for 14 days away. 7 business days would place the removal at 4 days before the closing. 4 days to allow the credit bureaus to process the deletion, to update their systems, to propagate the change through all the automated systems that financial institutions rely on. 4 days was enough time. 4 days was more than enough time. What happens to my son? I asked. I said it without inflection. I was asking for information, not for justice, not for punishment, just asking what the process would be. We're referring the matter to law enforcement, Mallet said. Identity theft and loan fraud are criminal matters in the state of Ohio. The case will be assigned to a detective in the fraud division. You'll be contacted by them for a formal statement. There will likely be charges filed, depending on what the detective determines after their investigation. I said I understood. And Miss Osei, I want you to know that you handled this exactly right. The recording you made, the documentation you compiled, the way you structured this entire situation. That's what allowed us to move quickly. That's what made this case clear-cut, instead of ambiguous. I thanked him. I did not tell him that the way I had handled this was simply the way I had learned to handle every billing dispute for 22 years in accounts payable, that I had applied the tools of my profession, documentation, organization, precise record-keeping, to the crime of my own son. Vanessa Pruitt, the notary, was contacted by investigators. She cooperated. She provided a statement explaining that Tobias had told her the document was a formality, that I had asked him to handle some paperwork on my behalf. She said she had not examined the signature carefully. She said she did not know the application was fraudulent. She explained her role as a simple favor to a co-worker, a quick stamp on a document that seemed routine. She was offered consideration in exchange for her cooperation. Her culpability was reduced from conspiracy to negligence. Her professional license would face sanctions. She would be required to renew her commission and complete additional training. But she would not face criminal charges. She had made a choice to stop asking questions when Tobias approached her. Now she was facing the consequence of that choice, though it was a gentler consequence than what Tobias would face. 4 days before my refinance closing at First Federal, I sat at a table in their office on Euclid Avenue. The closing officer was a woman I had not met before. She had pulled the mortgage documents from the file, and they were fanned across the table in front of me in the standard order. The deed, the mortgage note, the closing disclosure, the truth in lending statement, the title insurance commitment, everything I had worked 8 months to secure. Everything that had almost been lost. Everything that was now, finally, within reach because a fraudulent loan had been removed from my credit file exactly 4 days before this moment. The closing officer placed a pen in front of me. It was a standard bank pen, the kind that financial institutions keep in boxes by the dozens. Blue ink, ballpoint, the weight of it barely noticeable. But I was aware of it in a way I had not been aware of a pen in a long time. I was aware of the specific weight of it in my hand. I was aware that this signature, the one I was about to write on this mortgage note, would be mine, unmistakably mine, not forged, not practiced 100 times until it was close enough to fool someone who was not paying attention, not signed in front of a notary in a county I had never been to, mine, witnessed, voluntary, chosen. I picked up the pen. I looked at the signature line on the mortgage note. The line was blank. Waiting. I had signed documents before. Checks, leases, employment forms, the mortgage itself on the house I bought 16 years ago. But I was aware of this moment as a specific moment. I was aware that somewhere on my phone, in a recording that had been given to investigators and lawyers and fraud examiners, was the proof that another signature bearing my name had been written without my knowledge, without my consent, without my choice. I placed the pen to paper. I wrote my name, Renata. The R with its particular flourish, the way I've written it since I was 9 years old. The E and the N and the A that follows. The ta, the A at the end. Each letter exactly the way my hand moves. The way my hand has always moved. No hesitation, no practiced approximation. Just the signature that belongs to me and no one else. I lifted the pen. This one is mine. Patricia Holt called me on a Wednesday afternoon in the parking lot off Crestview Medical Group. I was coming back from lunch. I had a text from a medical provider about a coding denial, and I was thinking about how to respond to it when my phone rang with an unknown number. Renata, it's Patricia, she said. I wanted to give you a heads up before you see anything in the news. Tobias was arraigned this morning. He's been charged with identity theft and loan fraud, both felonies. I stood in the parking lot, my hand on my car door, and I wrote down what she told me. The case number, the charges, the court date for his preliminary hearing. I did not attend the arraignment. I did not see my son in a courtroom. I simply wrote the numbers down in the same spiral notebook I had opened the night the certified letter arrived. Below the circled notary discrepancy, below the red pen line I had drawn connecting Summit County to Cuyahoga County. Another line. Another fact. Another piece of evidence that this had happened, and that it was documented, and that the documentation would remain. How are you holding up? Patricia asked. I'm fine, I said. I was not shaken. I was not surprised. I was not grieving. I was simply standing in a parking lot, writing down a case number that would follow my son through the criminal justice system for the foreseeable future. The call started that evening. Tobias's father called first. He had not been meaningfully present in my son's life for 16 years. The child support had come regularly enough, but the presence had not. He had moved to Florida and built a new family, and Tobias had grown up understanding, without it ever being explicitly stated, that his father was not the person to call when something was wrong. But now, something was very wrong. And suddenly, my ex-husband had opinions about what this meant for the family. "This is going to destroy him," he said. His voice carried the weight of authority, as if he had been watching my son's entire life, as if he understood anything about what had led to this moment. "He's 27. A felony conviction will follow him forever. You have to think about what you're doing here." "What I'm doing," I said, "is not the same as what he did." "I know, but you're the one who turned him in. You could have handled this privately. You could have made him pay you back. You could have given him a chance to fix it." I did not respond. I did not explain that I had not turned him in, that the fraud investigator and the credit union had turned him in based on the evidence that I had documented. I did not explain that privately handling identity theft was not handling anything. It was simply enabling it to happen again. I did not explain that a chance to fix it was not something I owed someone who had stolen from me. "Think about what this does to him," my ex-husband said. "I have," I replied. "I've thought about very little else for the past month." The aunts called on Thursday, Tobias's aunts, my ex-husband's sisters. They called together, the way families sometimes do when they have decided that one of them needs to make a call and they want the weight of numbers behind it. "We just want you to think about what this does to him," one of them said. This was the phrase they had decided on. Think about what this does to him, as if my responsibility as his mother extended to absorbing the legal consequences of his crimes, as if love meant protecting someone from the outcome of their own choices, as if the 16 years I had spent raising him alone, teaching him about financial documents, explaining to him the importance of integrity, as if all of that had been conditional on my agreement to cover for him when he broke the law. "I have thought about it," I said. "I've thought about what it does to him, and I've thought about what it does to me. Those two things are not the same." "He's your son," the other aunt said. "He is," I agreed, "and I'm his mother. But I'm also the person whose name he used without permission. I'm also the person whose signature he forged. I'm also the person whose credit he damaged. Those things don't stop being true because we're family." I hung up the phone. I did not answer when they called back. Tobias texted me on Friday night, but just one message. No explanation, no attempt at justification. Just, "I thought you loved me." I read it. I set the phone face down on the table. I did not respond. The text sat unanswered for 3 days. I saw it every time I picked up my phone. I was aware of it the way you're aware of a weight in your pocket. Not constantly, but present whenever you move. I did not respond on Saturday. I did not respond on Sunday. On Monday morning, I picked up the phone, and I did not respond then either. I simply deleted the message, not blocked, not ignored, just deleted, so that it would no longer appear in my message history, so that I would no longer see it listed among my recent conversations. Tobias did not contact me again. 2 weeks after the refinance closed, I opened the file drawer in my home office where I keep the important documents. The mortgage agreement, the deed, the title insurance, the property tax statements, All the documents that prove that this house is mine, that I paid for it, that I own it without condition or complication, or anyone else's signature on the line. I pulled out the new mortgage documents from First Federal. The refinance had gone through smoothly. The loan was in my name alone. The payment would come out of my account alone. The equity would accrue to me alone. There was no one else listed. No co-signer. No authorized representative. No one who could claim a stake in it, or a right to it, or an explanation of it. I held the document in my hands. The paper was heavy. The letterhead of the bank was official and clear. My name was on it, in black ink, witnessed and notarized and stamped. I was aware of the specific weight of it. Not physical weight exactly, but the weight of what it represented. 16 years of working alone. 16 years of managing a mortgage payment without help. 16 years of building something that was entirely mine, that no one could take from me, that no one could forge or manipulate or claim without my knowledge. I slid the document into the file with the original mortgage, and I closed the drawer. The file was labeled with my name. Just my name. Not my son's. Not my ex-husband's. Not anyone else's. Just Renata Osse. And inside that file was the proof that I had built something that belonged entirely to me, and that I had protected it, and that I had not let anyone convince me to sacrifice it in the name of family obligation, or conditional love, or the kind of generosity that destroys itself. I closed the file drawer. I locked it, and I did not open it again. I do not claim to be over what happened. I do not pretend the outcome felt pure, or that there was satisfaction in watching the system do what it was designed to do. The 47-minute recording exists, and it did exactly what I needed it to do, but I do not listen to it anymore. I do not replay it, or share it, or reflect on it as evidence of some victory I accomplished. What I reflect on instead is the specific sensation of sitting across from my son at my dinner table, asking him questions I already knew the answers to, and understanding in that moment that I was in complete control of myself and the conversation and whatever outcome would follow. For 16 years, I had been managing the fallout of Tobias's choices. I had absorbed his failures and his excuses, and his expectations that his mother would protect him from consequence, that his mother would always absorb the cost. On that Sunday evening, for the first time in years, I was not managing his fallout. I was managing my own life. I was protecting myself. That is the quiet thing that I know now. Not that justice happened, though it did. Not that he faced charges, though he did. What I know is that I was steady enough to do what needed to be done. I was the person who made it happen. That steadiness was the actual thing that mattered. The rest is filing. 2 weeks after the refinance closed and the fraudulent loan was removed from my credit report, I opened the file drawer in my home office where I keep the documents that prove I exist as a separate, solvent person in the eyes of the financial system. The deed to my house, the original mortgage, the title insurance, the property tax statements, all of them in their proper folders, labeled in my handwriting, organized the way I have organized documents for 22 years, methodical, clear, prepared for any question that might arise. I pulled out the new mortgage from First Federal, the one that would save me $387 every month for the remaining 29 years until I owned this house outright with no one else's name attached to it. The document was heavy in my hands. The letterhead was official and clear. My name was on it, alone. I slid it into a hanging folder. I took a cardstock tab and I wrote my name on it. Just my name. Renata Osse. Not shared. Not conditional. Not dependent on anyone else's approval or presence or promise. Just mine. I pushed the drawer shut. The metal runners slid smoothly, the way they do when something is well maintained. I stood there in the quiet of my office, looking at the closed drawer, my hand still resting on the handle.